George Michael is remembered for many things, although most importantly, George Michael will always be remembered as an extraordinary artist. Even today, his music continues to enrich people's lives, as the catalogue of music that George Michael left us with is timeless. The likes of Careless Whisper, A Different Corner, and Faith are classics. It's time, ladies and gentlemen. This is my tribute to George Michael. I was exposed to George Michael's music at a young age. Hearing the likes of Careless Whisper and Wake Me Up Before You Go on the radio was common. George's music is hard to ignore, mainly because his music's everywhere. Even if I got a nickel every time Club Tropicana was played, it's safe to say I would be a rich man. Yet I still remember when he tragically passed away on Christmas Day in 2016. I wasn't a fan at the time though. I realized that this artist obviously meant a lot to many. Even so, I wasn't completely sure what was so special about his music. In fact, it was not until later that I became the slightest bit interested in George Michael's music. It had been a hard day. I was scrolling through YouTube looking for some content consisting of my favourite band, Queen, obviously, and I stumbled across a video that would change my life forever. The video consisted of George Michael singing Somebody to Love at the Freddie Mercury tribute concert. Due to this video being Queen related, I thought I'd give it a watch. Once the video began, I knew I was watching something noteworthy. I was bewildered by how the Careless Whisper singer was performing just as well as one of rock's greatest frontmen. The way George maneuvered the stage and hit those notes blew me away. Now this moment right here, this was when I was intrigued by George Michael. I had to listen to some of George Michael's music and know more about this artist who honestly caught me off guard. To kick things off, I listened to some of George Michael's more popular tracks, if that be whilst he was in Wham or during his solo career, and I was not disappointed. Listening to tracks such as Bad Boys, Faith, and Jesus to a Child allowed me to respect the variety of music that George Michael offered. The instrumentation and beautifully crafted lyrics spoke to me on a deeper level. I was astounded by how he could write a song such as Freedom with Wham and then later come up with a track such as Praying for Time. Speaking of Praying for Time, Listen Without Prejudice was the first George Michael album I bought. Firstly, because I already liked a few of the tracks on the album, and secondly, the album had only just been reissued. It was a no-brainer. And when that album arrived in the post and I finally listened to Listen Without Prejudice in its entirety, I was hooked, as the album meant so much to me. Waiting for That Day is about someone who can't deal with a relationship ending. Praying for Time is a somber track addressing the injustice and poverty found within this world. I could discuss this album further, but I will end by saying this. I will always consider Listen Without Prejudice to be my favourite George Michael album. After continuously listening to George Michael's music, I wanted to know exactly who the person was behind the music. I watched various documentaries on him, although the documentary that always stood out to me was the A Different Story documentary. I was fascinated by the story of how George went from being in a restrictive bubblegum pop duo to a solo artist who sang about sex, bereavement, and the need to break free from the shackles of Sony. Not to mention, the documentary touched on the dilemmas he was facing in his personal life. Shortly after watching the documentary, I came to the conclusion that I needed to listen to all of George Michael's music. And that's exactly what I did. Wham represented youth at the time. Comprised of George Michael and Andrew Ridgeley, Wham was an incredibly popular band at the time. With hits such as Club Tropicana, Wake Me Up Before You Go and The Edge of Heaven, Wham were unstoppable. Although something I feel Wham don't get credit for is the lyrics. Now you can't say this for every song. I'm looking at you, Wake Me Up Before You Go and Credit Card Baby. However, I recommend you take a closer look at the lyrics for Wham Rap, Young Guns, and Everything She Wants. You will be surprised. I have to admit that I'm more of a fan of George's solo work, but it would be idiotic of me to discard the fact that Wham were a magnificent band at the time, and I have to respect the duo for ending Wham in such a spectacular fashion with Wham the Final.
It's about spreading out. So a huge thank you to everyone, not only today, but for the last 4 years.
But geez, I'm sure a lot of us would appreciate seeing more footage from the final. I know the footage is somewhere. Wham's music videos were great. Even music videos which were solely on a stage, such as The Edge of Heaven and I'm Your Man, had some sort of entertainment value. Though you have to admit that the music videos for Bad Boys, Last Christmas, and Club Tropicana were the best. Moving on from Wham and into George Michael's solo career, I just have to mention Careless Whisper. Now, this is a song everyone knows. That sweet sax and the ambience of this song is marvelous. Nonetheless, I don't listen to Careless Whisper often due to the song being played pretty much everywhere. You can't escape the song, that sax still haunts me. Something else I wish to mention is that A Different Corner is a masterpiece. The track's so different to anything George Michael did with Wham. I knew you were waiting for me. This track acts as a splendid collaboration between two remarkable artists. No one in their right mind can dislike this song. The album Faith, what can I say, this was an awesome first solo album. Even though Faith isn't my favourite George Michael album, that's not to say I don't adore this album, as I'm incredibly happy to own Faith on vinyl. The title track Faith, Father Figure, and One More Try are songs that will forever remain synonymous with the artist. I'll never forget watching the Faith music video for the first time, witnessing this character George Michael had created, playing guitar while sporting a leather jacket and shades. And of course there is the music video for I Want Your let's perhaps not discuss that music video right now. After listening to Faith in its entirety 1,000 times, I began to listen to some Wham and George Michael compilation CDs. Additionally, I made numerous playlists consisting of some of my favourite George Michael and Wham tracks, although I mainly listened to the compilation album Ladies and Gentlemen. Now, when I listened to this album for the first time, that was when I decided I really wanted to be a fan of George Michael's music. I mean, this album has it all. Through this album I found out about a number of my favourite George Michael songs, one of them being You Have Been Loved, which deserves a lot more recognition. The atmosphere this song creates leaves me speechless. I remember listening to this song late at night, shivers went down my spine, and I was incredibly moved by the track. I know You Have Been Loved was originally featured on Older, though I won't be touching on that album in any great detail today. Older is an album that I haven't listened to in its entirety for a while, yet I will say this, I love most if not all of the songs on that album. Jesus to a Child, Spinning the Wheels, Star People, The Strangest Thing, and You Have Been Loved are tracks that I listen to often. It's spectacular that George Michael was able to turn his experience of bereavement into a full album. Moreover, the music video for Jesus to a Child is a work of art, people. The video is mystifying and tranquil at the same time. Looking back at Ladies and Gentlemen, there are other tracks which I began to appreciate, notably As, which is a wonderful cover of a Stevie Wonder song. Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me, this track is one you can't dismiss. George Michael's vocals are breathtaking here, and it's fantastic that Elton John joins in partway through the song. Outside is one that grew on me. I think it's partly to do with the context of the track. You have to respect that George Michael didn't just go into hiding. He instead released this track and created a rather controversial music video. However, you have to admit that it's awesome when the toilets turn into some sort of disco, featuring various people including George dressed as police officers. Nevertheless, Ladies and Gentlemen is not the perfect George Michael compilation album. This album was released in 1998, which means Ladies and Gentlemen doesn't feature any songs from Patience. Additionally, this album solely focuses on George's solo career, meaning no Wham songs. Yet, if you want a mix of Wham and George Michael songs including certain tracks from Patience, I would recommend listening to the George Michael 25 album, or make a playlist. That's probably the best idea. Although Ladies and Gentlemen will always hold a special place in my heart. After solidifying myself as a George Michael fan, I continued to listen to more and more George Michael and Wham tracks. I gave Patience a listen, and what do you know, the album's terrific. Amazing is a beautiful song that is a joy to listen to. John and Elvis Are Dead is a track I love, yet I dislike Freak. I can see what George Michael was going for, but this song proves incompetent in my opinion. After listening to Patience, I realised there wasn't much George Michael music I hadn't already heard. Albeit, there was still White Light, which I believe is an okay song. Not one of my favorites though, it's nothing substandard. I continued to make playlists by singles and albums, and I of course made my genius reinvention video on George Michael. The video needed to be made for a multitude of reasons, namely because hardly anyone discusses George Michael on YouTube, which saddens me. Not too soon after that, Andrew Ridgeley released the George and Me book, which was a breath of fresh air. I had read a number of books on George Michael, although the Andrew Ridgeley book is miles better than any of the other books about George. And then there was This Is How We Want You to Get High, which I found to be a disappointment. However, I was just happy to hear something new from the artist. Even still, the wonderful songs that George Michael released whilst alive are never going to disappear. His music is timeless and shall never be forgotten. And that's my tribute to George Michael. He was just as troubled as he was creative, and I think that's important to remember. I didn't want to dwell on the struggles George Michael faced in his personal life. Instead, I chose to discuss his music and explain how his music has impacted and changed my life, in the hopes that that would give you a greater understanding of how many lives have been influenced by George's music. He was an extraordinary performer, songwriter, and vocalist. Furthermore, the catalogue of music that George Michael left us with will live on, transforming the lives of many for countless years to come.
Most of us want to leave something, want to have something that will be remembered without, without people really having to search in their memory. And I want to leave songs. I believe I can leave songs that will mean something to other generations.
Hello, I hope you've enjoyed this tribute to George Michael. This is a video I've been waiting to release for a while, and there's no better time than now. Make sure to tell me in the comments down below about how George Michael's music has influenced your life. Like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you're new, and please share this video to everyone who likes George Michael. Until next time, this has been a tribute to George Michael, and bye.